What up, Blender fam? 7G3D here, and I'm back with another tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to do a glitching effect. You could use this for logos, animated stuff, video textures, or textures, whatever you want to use it for. In this instance, I'll be making some animated hologram video textures that I'm going to use in my music video. My workflow for this is a little bit different compared to everyone else's, since I'll be using OpenGL to render things in real time. But you can use this technique in Cycles or any other engine you want. Now, to make some of the textures, I'll be using Microsoft Paint and GIMP, but you can use any photo editing software you want. I rarely go into my usage of image editors, but I use them so much that I feel it's an important aspect to include in this video. And if you wanted to skip past that part, I'll be providing the animated video textures in the description. So with that said, let's begin. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and create our first image. I'm going to use a 512 by 512 for the size, but you can go bigger if you want more detail. And just going to place some lines on the screen. What it's going to do is it's going to create that nice wavy effect in our video. I'm going to do some varying thicknesses. Some ones that don't go through the whole screen. And make sure you get them on both sides too. Do a nice thin one. Alright, so that looks good. And I'm going to save this as a PNG. If you use JPEG, you'll get some compression artifacts that you don't want. So PNG is always good. And it's actually smaller when using monochrome black and white, so that's always a benefit. Next, I'm going to create another texture with some text to give us some source material to work with. And I'm going to crop this down in scale. And I'm going to resize it to maintain the specifications for textures in Blender with the multiples of 32. And I'm going to save this as a PNG. Alright, so next up I'm going to show you guys quickly how I process some of my textures. This is going to make it look like a hologram panel. So just show you the first texture I have. And it's just an image with lines in it. Black and white gradients. And it has an alpha channel. So I just add the alpha channel, color to alpha. And I'll use this in my texture. So I'm going to bring in my text. Then I'm going to bring in the CRT lines. Add an alpha channel to the text. Color to alpha. And then I'm going to invert it. Make the CRT lines on the top and set it to subtract. And I'm also going to increase the scale of it. So I'm just going to go map small tiles. Now I have a little bit of smaller lines. I like the way that looks. Now we're going to merge these visible layers and invert the color again. We're going to remove the black color. Now we have this nice type of texture. We're going to duplicate this a couple times. And we're going to blur it with a Gaussian. Try 10. And each one you go down, you want to blur it more. Go 35 with that one. And we'll duplicate it again. And we'll blur this one to like 50. Alright, that looks pretty glowy. And the first one, we'll blur that with a blur of 1, just to sharpen the edges, or the smooth out the edges. Yeah, that last one's too much glow, so I'm gonna delete that. Merge all these visible layers and save it as a save it as a PNG. Next up, I want to process the lines, and I'm just going to add a blur to it. Very subtle Gaussian blur, maybe like 5. And that'll round out the displacement modifier a lot better. So just overwrite this. And I'll also be using this clock animation I made. All these files I'll be providing for download, so just check the description. You can use this clock in your commercial projects if you want for free, no problem. So I'll be using this on our animated texture as well to demonstrate the movement of the animated texture. Alright, so go ahead and open up Blender, and we're going to be setting up Blender for rendering out these video textures. So go ahead and add an image plane, scale it up a bit, apply rotation and scale with Control A, go into edit mode, unwrap it, and we're going to hit 7 on a numpad, 5 on ortho, or to go into ortho. We're going to add a camera. Go ahead and drag it up on the Z-axis a bit, go into your render dimensions, and set your texture scale. I'm going to use 512 by 512. It's pretty good for performance. I don't have a supercomputer, so I like to keep things small, but you can make it as crisp as you want. Next, in the camera settings, we're going to go and set it to orthographic. Set it back a bit, go into the camera view mode, and we're going to line it up with the edges of our plane. And just to make things safe, go ahead and lock our scale, rotation, and location on our camera. And that's how you set it up for rendering out textures. Next up, we're going to go ahead and animate that line texture we made. And we're going to make it loop. So go ahead and select your plane and create a new material. And call this looping lines, or whatever you like to call it. Create a new texture. And we're going to go ahead and open up our line texture. Control C and Control V to paste the name to keep everything organized. And go ahead and go into view mode. Press Alt Z to go into texture mode. And our texture is black, so we need to put the emission on. Alright. Now we need to make this move. So I like to use a UV warp. So select that modifier and create a sphere empty. Select the plane again. And in the from, select the sphere. And the to, select the plane. And select the UV map. When we select that sphere and move it, it'll animate our UV map. So this is the tricky part, getting it to loop. So with the sphere selected, I'm going to control the y-axis of the sphere. And I'm going to move up until I get where I think it's in the correct spot. So 338. All right, set the keyframe. Go to the last frame. And keyframe it again. And you just go back and forth. Place the keyframe. I went too high on that. That's pretty good. And this should be good. Good enough. And in the graph editor, select your vertex and press linear. And that'll make everything roll nice and smooth. Alright, so that's a little too fast for me. Go ahead and slow it down a bit to 24. Alright. And we're going to render this out. So I'm going to go over how to do that right now. So in your output, you want to select MPEG, MP4. For the quality, we go none, use constant bitrate. And select it and put it to like 500. Keep it very low because this is going to be used as a texture, so we want it to run good. And the maximum will be 1000. That's probably, you could probably go lower than that even. And on the speed, we're going to go slow to keep that file size down. Set my output. Go into my image editor. I'm going to do a test render with the OpenGL button. Set our world background and only render. Do one more test. And let's render it out with our OpenGL render button. Alright, let's test it out. Looks to be working. Next, we're going to create a compiled video texture. So select your plane and just delete the material because we don't need it for now. And go only render background, turn that off. Go into solid mode. And we're going to select our second layer. And we're going to use an add-on called Images as Planes. So if you don't have that enabled, go to User Preferences, Add-ons, type in Images, and then you'll see Images as Plane. And then you enable it with that check mark and save user settings. Alright, next up, I'm going to go Shift-A, Mesh, add Images as Planes, and I'm going to select that clock. I'm going to press Alt-Z to go into texture mode. And I'm going to turn the emission on in the texture. I'm going to turn it to 2. Gives you that nice cyan look. Then I'm going to make sure my frame length is set. Auto refresh and cyclic. Press Alt-A to play it. Press 0 on the numpad, go into camera view, and scale the texture up. Next, I'm going to go in and add that second image. I just have alpha, emission, and you can select the stencil button too. With or without it. I like it with it. When you hit the stencil button, it kind of cleans up the alpha maps, makes it a little sharper. It's a little too much for me, but I'll use it. Just gonna create a quick image with this. do a test render. And also in color management, usually it's set to 0 and 1. You can brighten up your texture if you need to make the contrast more. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and rename this. Rename it to video texture, and I'm going to keep all the settings the same. And go ahead and press the OpenGL render button. See how fast the frames are running? That's why I love OpenGL. Alright, I'm going to go and deselect that so I can see again. And now that we have that video created, I'm going to go ahead and delete this stuff. Next, we're going to work on the chromatic aberration. So we'll go into our compositing. Use nodes backdrop and auto render should be turned on. Then in the render panel, post processing, select compositing. And the output, we're going to rename it with a suffix like effects. We're going to input a movie clip. And it'll be the video we just made. And an output. Composite output viewer. We'll connect our nodes. Image to image. Next, we want to create the chromatic aberration. We're going to use a distortion, lens distortion. We're going to set the dispersion to like 0.2, something like that. Select projector to keep everything from distorting too much. So that looks pretty good. And what we're going to do is we're going to animate this. So I'm going to set it to like 0.25. And we're going to insert a keyframe. We're going to slide over, go into our graph panel. Press N. Go into modifiers and add a noise modifier. Zoom in a little bit. As you can notice, here's the frames. So we want it to flicker maybe 2-3 times a second. So that's way too fast. So we're going to go backwards with it. -1. And the amplitude, I want it to go a little higher than that. And I'm going to press G and Y to bring this up. I don't want it to go under 0. Maybe that's a little too much. And we'll start on a high area to see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so we got to go to our UV image editor. Go to viewer. All right, that looks pretty good. Go to our render, and we'll render out the animation through this button right here. This OpenGL don't work in a compositor. Oh, we got to turn our render layer on real quick. Combine Z, solid, and render panel. And let that render out real quick. See what this looks like real quick. Looks pretty good. All right, next we're gonna go back into our first layer and we're gonna render out the waviness of the texture. So we're gonna select our image plane and add that video we just made to it. Go ahead and select the emission, set it to like 1. Go into camera view mode. Go ahead and match the movie length. Cyclic. All right, that should be good. Scale it up a bit. All right, so to get this to wave, we want to add a displace modifier. Go new, hit that, and we're going to select our line video we made. Match movie length, auto refresh, cyclic. Go back into the displace, select UV map, put the strength in like 0.25, and in the direction we want X. Next, we want to add a subdivision surface and put it above the displace and set it to like 4 or 5 with a simple. Then set another one with like 2 with a Catmull Clark after the displace. Now we're going to adjust it. You can crank it pretty far with that. All right, I like the look of that. So let's render this out again. Same settings. Now, if you're doing some production work, you want to go way higher with the bit rate. I'm just doing this low for demonstration purposes. All right, let's move this over a bit. And we're going to give it a render. Oh, wait, hold on a sec. Turn compositing off. And we'll render it now. All right, next, we want to get rid of this texture. Hold down, shift, press X. And we're going to open up a new one, the one we just made. And we're going to delete that displace modifier and everything that's on the plane. Press Alt-G with the plane selected to reset the origin to the center. All right, we got to set the movie length. All right, we got our test going right there. Next, we're gonna fracture this, like glitch it. So let's duplicate this plane. Let's work a little better. Hide the camera real quick. So we got the second plane selected. We're gonna raise it up a bit. We're gonna select subdivision surface on that second one with a simple setting. Turn it up to 5. Apply it. And we're gonna go into edit mode. Deselect a few of these lines. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna deselect a few of these lines. And delete all the rest. So we have kind of like a layer like that. Then on this one, we'll go in there and delete half of that. Nice thin line like that. Go into your transform panel. Keyframe X. Go to camera view. So we got keyframe on 1. Go to like 10. Insert another keyframe. Go to the next frame. And we're gonna move it to the right a little bit. Insert the keyframe. Go ahead 5 keyframes. Set another one. Go to the next keyframe, set it back to 0. And we just keep going up a little bit. Try to randomize it. And we can go in the opposite direction too, to the left a little bit. So let's just play that, see what it looks like. And I'm going to do it one more time. So we'll move this up a little more. Duplicate this layer. Subdivision surface. Get it right through the logo, like right there. One right there, one right there. Control I, delete the other ones. Camera view mode. And we'll go the opposite direction with this most of the time. So keyframe single on X. Crank this one to the left. Move it pretty far. And we'll just finish it off with this one. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And we'll render this one out as FX final. And we'll just click our OpenGL render button. Go back into our regular view mode. Delete everything else. Mesh images as planes. And we'll give it a test. Alright, that works pretty good. Now we have to make a mask for this, which is just a black and white image. But this is going to tell where to have the transparency. So we want to select use nodes for this material. Select our texture. And we're going to put in a color ramp. And we're going to crank up the white on it. Like that. Let's give it a test. You use our color management panel to get a little more sharper look. Way too much. That's fine for now. And we're gonna rename this one Final Mask. And also when you're rendering out black and white stuff, you can hit black and white here to save some space on that. So let's go ahead and render that out. Go ahead and deselect the nodes. In this texture panel, we're gonna add that mask. Match movie length, auto, cyclic. In the influence panel, we want alpha, RGB to intensity. And that's how you do it. In the final versions, you can go super high quality, like 2K with your textures, and it'll look super crisp. I just use low quality here to save time. But I hope you learned a bunch of stuff from that. I hope you enjoyed that. And until the next one.